Hello, dear colleagues. In this discussion, having looked at the rates of reaction, having looked at all those concepts that involve the rate of reaction, it is imperative that we look at the factors that affect the rate of the reaction. So, the factors that influence rate of reaction determine how quickly a chemical reaction occurs, and this is how each factor contributes. So we're talking about the first factor, which is concentration of the reactants. So we find that the higher the concentration of reactants, the higher the rate of the reaction is going to be. And the reason is that more molecules or ions are present in the same volume, leading to more frequent collisions between reactant particles. So you see during the chemical reaction, the reactant particles are colliding because they have energy, they are moving haphazardly, colliding with each other, and therefore, if we have a number of molecules per unit volume, okay, you are going to have a lot of reactions taking place. So the higher the concentration of the reactants, generally, the higher the rate of the chemical reaction. For example, if we increase the concentration of hydrochloric acid in a reaction with magnesium, you increase the production of hydrogen gas. For example, the reaction between a dilute hydrochloric acid and that of course, dilute hydrochloric acid and magnesium. Then you look at the other one, which is of concentrated hydrochloric acid with magnesium, you'll find that the latter will produce more hydrogen gas than the former. And therefore, it is very important to look at the concentration of the reactants. Then the temperature, increasing temperature typically speeds up the reaction. This is because the higher temperatures provide particles with more kinetic energy, causing them to move faster and collide more frequently with greater energy, surpassing the activation energy barrier. And you know that activation energy is usually the amount of energy that is required to break down, okay, that is required to break down the bonds, okay, between the atoms of the reactants. So if those bonds don't break so fast, then you'll have a slower reaction. But if you increase the temperatures, then you increase the rate at which these particles are moving, but also look at once, of course, they gain this energy, this kinetic energy, and they are moving faster, you'll find that this energy is also used in breaking down their bonds. So meaning you will reduce the activation energy. So meaning you will easily surpass the activation energy barrier. So in that regard, the chemical reaction will take place faster. So when you look at cooking at higher temperature, it is faster due to the increased chemical reactions. So maybe if we take an example of, we can draw a graph. So you find the probability of particles increasing, okay? That is the probability of particles with a particular kinetic energy this side. And here, if it is the kinetic energy of particles, so when you have a lower temperature, you'll have such a kind of graph. But when you have more temperature, when you increase the temperatures, then you'll have something like this. Meaning, this is a a particular kinetic energy that is equal to the activation energy. So this is at lower temperatures, and this is at higher temperatures. So this side we can say maybe the rate of reaction, okay, or you can say probability of particles with particular kinetic energy. So once the temperature is the once the temperatures are low, then the rate of reaction is actually low. Okay, but when you have and what are we talking about actually? Let me put it actually. Let me put the rate of reaction down here. We can maybe put it down here so that this is more understandable. So you have the rate of reaction being low when you have a lower temperature, and obviously it keeps on increasing. The rate of reaction will increase when you increase the temperatures. So maybe if I'm to draw a graph, another graph talking about rate of reaction vis-a-vis temperature, I'll find that I can first of all generally have a linear graph that represents the rate of reaction between temperature. I mean that it represents the rate of reaction and temperature. Then the next part is pressure. So pressure for gases, especially when you have gaseous reactants, the higher the pressure, the higher the rate for the chemical reaction. And the reason is that pressure reduces the volume available for the gas molecules, leading to more frequent collisions among the reactants. An example can be industrial synthesis of ammonia in the Haber process. So you find that this process is faster under high temperature, under high pressure. The other one is the presence of light, which is, for example, in photochemical reactions. So this light can speed up certain reactions by providing the necessary energy to break down the chemical bonds. An example is in photosynthesis, where food or glucose or starch is manufactured by the plants through a process known as photosynthesis, where you have light, okay, that is providing energy, striking the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll has having water and the carbon. So when the two combine in the presence of in the presence of heat or in the presence of light, you are forming food, which is always later on you can form glucose. Of course, you first form starch, but what is important is that glucose is formed. So photons from light excite molecules or atoms, making them more reactive. So photosynthesis in plants relies on sunlight to drive the reaction between carbon dioxide and water. Then the size of particles for solid reactants. This is important. So the more smaller the particle is, the more the rate will increase. So smaller particles have a larger surface area relative to their volume, providing more area for collisions. So imagine a reaction between, for example, magnesium and maybe hydrochloric acid. So this is a solid and maybe this is an aqueous form, produce hydrogen gas and maybe magnesium chloride. So what would happen? Now, if you have, for example, magnesium ribbons, or magnesium ribbon or bigger particles of magnesium, something like this, then another one breaks down this ribbon into smaller particles. So here, the reaction rate will be high compared to this, because you have more magnesium presenting, of course, a larger surface area for reaction than where you have a ribbon. So powdered sugar also dissolves and reacts faster in water than a sugar cube. So in catalysts, we are talking about also another factor that speeds up chemical reaction or that affects the rate. So where you have a catalyst, the reactions increase without being, of course, we know that these catalysts are not taking part in the chemical reactions, but they help to speed up the chemical reactions. So how do these do it? Obviously, the catalysts reduce the activation energy by providing an alternative path for the chemical reaction to take place. So catalysts provide an alternative reaction pathway with a lower activation energy, making it easier for reactants to convert into products. So in an example that we can take is the enzymes that act as biological catalysts speeding up the metabolic reactions in the body. An example are those enzymes that work on food substrates during digestion. An example can be butyrene, of course. You can have peptidase. You can have a number of them that work on food substrates during digestion process. So maybe is we can give you a graph that shows the activation energy in the presence of a catalyst. So the activation energy could be here, and then here we are talking about the potential energy, and down here we have reaction coordinates, or what we can call the path of reaction. So here we have reactants, we have products here. Now, if I extrapolate you'll find that products are at a lower energy potential than the reactants. So you'll have the difference in between the products and reactants being the heat of the reaction. So when you introduce in what we call, when introduce in a catalyst, first of all, the activation energy before is going to be there. And then when you introduce a catalyst, the activation energy is going to reduce. So this is the activation energy, with no catalyst, then activation energy with a catalyst. So this graph is very important, and you need to understand it. So meaning we are saying the catalyst provides an alternative pathway for the chemical reaction to take place, and this alternative pathway has a lower activation energy. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the factors that do affect chemical reactions rates in most cases. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this content with a colleague.